morning.
Morning. Morning.
Forgive my foot. I cut myself a little yesterday doing some yard work, and so I need to keep my foot extended so it doesn't open up. This is actually posture. If you look carefully at iconography, you'll see that there are some bodhisattvas that sit in this posture with one foot down, and it's the symbolizing their call to action. So rather than sitting in the most common is the full lotus posture, like the Buddha is here in the center of the altar, or Prajnaparamita is on the left. But oftentimes Avalokiteshvara, which here has the 1,000 arms on the right side, that's one of the famous postures of Avalokiteshvara. So in meditation, but one leg down, ready to catch the baby. one way or another. So I'd like to continue this morning talking about the 6 paramitas, which are one of the oldest formulations of practice in Mahayana Buddhism, or really I would say the oldest. And I emphasize that not because older is better. We have this one little thing in our mind. We have a lot of little things in our mind, little dynamics, and one of the dynamics is, I will get back to the original. And if I could get the older thing, that would by definition be more original and therefore better. So I don't emphasize the ancientness of this teaching for those purposes. I emphasize the ancientness because ancient can mean something else. It doesn't just mean old, it means present at each time. So those things which our ancestors in antiquity woke up to are things which are also true now. They're dharmas or truths or teachings which are true in this present time. And so it's not locked in antiquity. Its antiquity or its ancientness also means it's relevant right now, right? There's something that we have to find, not just kind of scrape together the memories that we can find that are recorded in old writings or records of practices or paintings, sculptures and those kinds of things, and trying to figure it out just through those. We find the aliveness of it in this moment, in this life, and that is aided by those writings, by those paintings, by all of the oral traditions, etc. But they're not confined by them. So also we use the word ancient really purposely rather than eternal, because notice how the word eternal lifts off of your normal reality. Very quickly our mind goes to, there's this substratum which is true all the time, and then my life is kind of made up of some conglomeration of malarkey. I think it's the technical term for it anyway. And then that if I could escape the malarkey, then I could get back to that substratum of truth. Buddhism doesn't teach that way. It says that actually all the malarkey is a vehicle of awakening. What the ancients woke up to, and our ancestors through time have woken up to, that was no different than now. They may have a different malarkey set, but it was still a malarkey set, and they figured out how to work with it and found out that it itself was the mind of awakening, revealing itself to them. I was thinking this week, this often happens to me in the summer. I don't know, happens to me, or I do in the summer about this time of year. As we draw close to the anniversary of our daughter's death. I feel many things shift inside, and a kind of aliveness there. And it reminds me that all of my forward movement, all of the ways in which I try to make life work, or to wake up, or to be better, or whatever, all of that forward movement, while it's noble, also is ignoring something that is more fundamental than the project, my spiritual project, my spiritual project, the project of my life, whatever it is that I'm working towards. And that this path that the ancients practiced and is alive for us now requires something different than pushing forward. Requires something different than knowing, okay, this is what needs to be done, and then doing it. That's too separated. I'm not saying it's not important to know what needs to be done and then to do it, but there's something more primary to that. And this path calls us to that. Meditation, we oftentimes describe as taking the backward step. And that's a very interesting phrase, to take the backward step that turns the light and shines it back. That's kind of the full phrase. If you just say, taking the backward step, asking, what is this? Not just pushing forward to kind of figure it out. And when we're sitting in meditation, it's easy to forget that. We come with our own set of hopes, our own set of experiences, our own set of drives, and we've carved out some time. Most of us live pretty busy lives, so we've carved out some time to be able to sit down. It's very easy for that basic drive that says, okay, I'm doing something good. Meditation's good, right? You might have an app on your phone. I'm joking about that, but those apps can be really helpful. Many people benefit from them. But what the kind of, I would say, the danger in them is knowing that we're doing something good, and so then we can kind of keep the machinery of goodness going. And this more fundamental thing, which is, what is this? Very immediacy of life can be kind of surfed over the top of it. To sit down and to ask ourselves in a really straightforward yet tender way, what's here? I mean, that's on a physical level, the kind of physical world or material world. You might hear, this time of year is really fun. Every once in a while you'll get a little jolt from the plums dropping from the plum tree. They're still kind of hard, and there's a metal roof right underneath them. So I'll be sitting in my office, doing something, preparing for a talk or something, and it's like, it's like a little wake-up stick. So there's those kind of things we're noticing. What's this? But then there's also our own internal state, or at least we call it an internal state, our layers of emotionality, layers of memory, etc. So if we don't take the time to really step backward and let the space open, oftentimes a teaching like the 6 paramitas, it's just a little ungrounded. It's kind of up here. There's no real traction because we haven't allowed our life to be present. We're kind of skipping past it a little bit. And because we're always kind of going forward, it's probably not enough to say just sit still. You probably also have to think like step backward to really reach stillness. This is different than detaching. It's your feet on the ground. And this is what I mean by practical, that this path is ancient but practical, because it works with what is. But it's very easy to scoop over top of what is. Now, this is what I've been teaching the past few weeks about clear seeing. That this practice of looking at the Prajnaparamita teachings, which are fundamentally teachings of shunyata, or teachings of emptiness, kind of scary word, emptiness. But that those teachings are a teaching about seeing. They're not a teaching just about how things are, they're also about how we are, right? How we are with living with the world. And so there's this kind of spontaneity in these teachings, which is what I'm pointing at this morning a little bit. We've been studying these 5 flavors of, or 5 versions of shunyata. The first one being already broken. Things are, everything you know will break. Or we could say a nicer way, it will cease to be what it is now. Which you will likely experience as breaking if you experience something, because you're used to it being how it is, right? And then it's not how it is anymore, and that feels like breaking. But the already part of that already broken is important. It's not like that just happens in time. It's we already mistake things for some object that we know what it is. It's never that. It's never what we think it is. Now, it may accommodate us, and because we can keep using the glass as the example of something already broken, the glass, Ajahn Chah says, holds my water admirably. Beautiful phrase. Right? So it's not as if it begrudges a relationship with me, that it doesn't function in some way, but it's already not a glass in the way that I try to dismiss it as a glass. Oh, it's just a glass. The second one, interdependence. That if we start to see from the first one, the already broken, the kind of release of grasping helps us then see that everything is intertwined. Any phenomena that we encounter is completely connected with all other phenomena, even very far off phenomena. You could find the path to them. What's that thing they talk about people like 6 degrees of separation? Like you pick any 2 people in the world and you can connect them within 6. That's pretty cool. Probably it's less now that people have Facebook and all that kind of stuff. I wonder if anyone's redone the studies. I don't know if that counts as a connection. So interdependence. And then if we look into interdependence a little bit more deeply, we start to realize, oh, no place to stand. I don't have any firm ground, which could be very scary, right? But also is super necessary. And then, and that whatever it is I'm experiencing, this is the 4th flavor, is just what it is, right? The glass, the flower, my friend, my pimple, all of those are just exactly what they are. And then the last flavor is I've called true meeting or touching. Right? That I'm in a relationship now with whatever it is that I'm experiencing, which isn't a relationship of 2 objects relating to each other or a subject and object relating to each other, but is this thing where I can't quite say 2. I can't say we're 2, but I also can't say we're 1. If you follow the logic of the Prajnaparamita, you would also say it's not 2 and not 1, which is linguistically sort of bonkers. But if you just say it over and over again, it never makes sense. But you will yield to its its structure in some way. So we've been studying those. Part of what I'm bringing up today is those are not forced. Those perspectives are not things to force. They're things to realize. And what I mean by realize here is like when you see the moon in the daytime sky. Are you ever lucky that way? Mm. Yeah, it's quite a surprise. Oftentimes it can be mistaken for a cloud, or your eye just doesn't catch it. It's usually illuminated towards the top, which is really different than at the nighttime when it's receiving the sun from the bottom. And it's really miraculous. Now there's a trick about seeing it, but the way to see it isn't forceful. It's just realize it. And the more you realize it, the more you'll realize it. And what's really cool about it is it's not always there. Right? If it was always there, it would be easy. You could sort of force it, right? You could put a string around your finger or set a little thing on your demon box to remind you and look for it or whatever. You could kind of make this plan. But the moon doesn't deal with plans like that. She's too watery, silvery. She's not going to play like that, especially in the daytime. So if your regard for the moon is cultivated by realizing the moon, seeing it again and again. No force, just appreciation. I'm very fond of our grandson. He's quite a pain in the rear these days. People say terrible twos, which I was saying for the first half of the terrible twos. I was like, no, it's the hilarious twos. Because I'm grandpa, right? So I don't have to like deal with a lot. I mean, I deal with a certain amount and then I pass it back. But now I'm thinking terrible twos might be right. He's beautiful and wonderful and quite demanding. But he has the good fortune, and we have the good fortune of being close together. And my wife, Azusa, is very good about this realizing the moon business. And so he's growing up in this environment where she's always saying, oh, the moon, like during the day. So now he has this habit. He'll be like, Ji-chan, that's what he calls me, Ji-chan, Ji-chan, the moon. You know, it's really good. It's really good. And so I just bring that up because I want to talk about him because I like him, but also because we can train ourselves, but it's not this kind of rigidity of training. That's what I'm talking about with the spontaneity. It's not how am I going to force myself into the whatever. It's actually much harder than that. The force your way into whatever will not frustrate you in the way that this will frustrate you. Your incapacity to realize will crush you. It really will. I mean, that's what our life is made up of. The sorrowful part of it is our incapacity to realize crushing us. You know? And that's kind of heavy. but really, that's what we're doing again and again. We're making this kind of pitch in this direction of like, oh yeah, I know what it is. I'm going to make it happen. I'm going to do this. I'm going to do that. In the Hymn to the Perfection of Wisdom, which is a part of the one of the Prajnaparamita Sutras called the Prajnaparamita in 8,000 lines. It's, as scholars would say, it's kind of the oldest Prajnaparamita text. So the problem with scholars is they think they could know that kind of thing. I prefer to say that it is the text which can be identified in a historical way as the one that was written down, the one we found so far, the earliest one written down. In a physical way, in the world that we are considering that we live in right now. Something like that. Because these sutras are not books, right? Actually, they're not books. They're everything. They're like in the Matrix when everything turned into that code. Just turn it to Sanskrit, you know, Chinese. That's like that. Everything is teaching these sutras of the Prajnaparamita. And so then someone scrapes together one in 8,000 lines and says, okay, here's one, you know. But we should always take the bookends off of it, right? It's not contained in those 8,000 lines. Anyway, so in that sutra, there is a section called the Hymn to the Perfection of Wisdom. And in this, we recite this in the mornings during the week on Tuesdays and Thursdays. And it's a hymn to perfection of wisdom as the personified mother of the Buddhas. And in this hymn is talking about Prajnaparamita as the womb of awakening, or the mother of the Buddhas. And it says this very curious thing. She does nothing about all dharmas. In this case, dharmas mean things. She does nothing about all dharmas. Simply by shining spontaneously, she guides to the spiritual path whatever beings have wandered into dangerous, negative, self-centered ways. It's a really beautiful image. She does nothing about all things. She simply is shining spontaneously. She is illuminating spontaneously. And that illumination guides to a pathway. All beings who have wandered into dangerous, negative, self-centered ways. I think those are all, in a way, synonyms for each other. Okay. What is it to be dangerous? It's to be self-centered, to be negative. So this is the quality of wisdom, or the quality of prajna, or the quality of these different ways of seeing that we are trying to cultivate in this path of the perfections. that shining, that's the same character in Chinese as the clear seeing, the clear of clear seeing that I've been talking about. So the receptivity that's necessary for this kind of relating, a relationship which is not of a subject and an object, where you're trying to be like, I want to see the interdependence of this object. Let me get it. Let me get my emptiness goggles focused just right so I can see the emptiness. There's a place for that. Play with it, like think about, oh wow, this chair is made up of all these different parts, whatever, it's not bad to do that. It's just that notice how you're kind of forcing something. And there's something that's much more simple and direct. It's not trying to view things in a fixed way, but neither is it trying to remove yourself to make the object be permanent in some way. While I was making my notes for this, I really wanted to, I have a little note here that says, feels like ... And I was thinking I could give you like a feeling. And because I cut my leg yesterday, my first thing is that it feels like failure. Which it does sometimes feel like failure, especially when you do something stupid. You never do that, you do stupid, you're like, oh. All the warning signals were there. It was like, I'm kind of tired. I should just stop now, but I didn't listen. Anyway, but actually what I want to say is it feels like many, 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 many things. The point here is it's not something to do about a dharma. It's not something to do about a feeling. It's not something to do about a phenomena of any kind. The point is not to have a particular feeling or a particular experience. The point is to start looking from this place in which you're not insisting upon the feeling or the perception to be a certain thing. That takes a stepping back, not a plowing through. There's times to plow through. Okay? So, as we've been talking about generosity, this kind of spontaneity, I think there's a bunch of reasons why generosity is the first paramita. One of them is because it's just the best. It's like joyful and wonderful, and it's about giving and receiving, which is happening all the time. It's about appreciation. It's about openness. It's about opening. And so I think it's right, because it's like, if you never remembered anything about the paramitas at all, anything that I or anyone ever said about wisdom or emptiness or anything, just practice generosity. It will lead you. It will lead you. Right? It leads you to non-grasping. And it is led by non-grasping. That's what makes it so amazing. And it's also why it's really important that the second thing that comes on the list is ethics. Because openness has a way of getting us in trouble. The kind of feelings that come from that openness, which is wonderful, we will inevitably start to grasp them. And in the grasping them, we start to tumble into a boundaryless world. And boundaries are very important. And ethics are reminding us that this openness of generosity is not about the dissolving of boundaries. It's about waking up to the non-separation, which is revealed as many things. You are you, I am me. And that's how generosity can be expressed. If I try to take away the me and the you, the generosity starts getting funny, right? Have you ever met somebody who's like really sure that you want to give all your stuff to them? It's like super groovy, man. And then like pretty soon they're on your couch for 3 weeks or something like that. It's very easy to end up there. Right? So while generosity emphasizes this opening or this openness, the interdependence, the non-separation, the non-grasping, and all those things that happen, ethics emphasize just the opposite, particularly in the prohibitions of ethics. Now, ethics is a pretty wide word. The word in in Sanskrit is sila, and it includes all kinds of facets of ethics, including a positive ethic, which would be like, what are the things that you should do, not just things that you shouldn't do. But a lot of times when we get to ethics, we need to, at least at the beginning, pay attention to the not, to the no, to the stop, which I got to tell you, doesn't feel quite as good as the like openness, oftentimes, at least in the beginning. So one of my favorite stories from the Buddha's lifetime is about a character named Angulimala. And Angulimala was born into a very powerful family, but he was born under the sign of the bandits. And he was kind of, would be the word, destined to grow up to be a thief, a troublemaker, a brigand of some kind. And he did, in fact, become that. He went to study with a teacher, a spiritual teacher, and he was so accomplished that there was a lot of the fellow students that he was with were very jealous of him. This is the story anyway. And so they set up this situation where they kind of put him in competition with his teacher, and kind of start lifting him up as being, oh, maybe he's more wise than the teacher is. And the teacher not being really fully baked, or fully boiled. I used to say that, by the way, when I was a middle school teacher, when the new teachers would come in. It just takes 3 years to get hard-boiled. That's how long it takes. If you're a middle school teacher, that's how long it takes. But actually, you don't want to get hard-boiled. You want to get the soft-boiled. That's the best way. The yolk should stay runny. So if it heats too hot, then you get hard-boiled. It's better to be soft-boiled. Anyway, diversion. So teachers maybe, not quite boiled yet. And so he gets jealous and afraid that the student's going to take him over. So he gives him this teaching. Now remember, he's a spiritual teacher, and he gives him this teaching. He says, if you want to truly realize the way, right, we've been talking about today, you need to assemble a garland of 1,000 human fingers. And when you assemble this and wear it around your neck, you will have you'll have this great awakening, and you will become the Bhagavan. You will become the most honored one, right? And so because of his spiritual hunger and because of the deception of his teacher, he sets out to do this, and he hides in the forest, and he bushwhacks people, kills them, and cuts their fingers off and puts them on a string and wears them around his neck. That's where Angulimala comes from. A mala, many of you are familiar with the mala, is like a prayer beads. Okay, so Anguli means finger, a garland of fingers. And so he's doing this. He's causing a lot of problem. And like a village that's nearby, they end up moving, like having to move the village. And then the king's trying to figure out what to do. They need to go like find this. But he's so strong and so ferocious, no one can really defeat him. And the Buddha's in the area. It's kind of interesting, the story, that the Buddha doesn't do anything until Angulimala's mother goes to try to stop him. And what the sutras tell us is that the Buddha said, oh, now we would think he's trying to save the mother, but actually he says something different. He says, I cannot allow Angulimala to fall into the unbelievably horrible karma of having killed your mother. The mother being killed, that's not so great. But killing your mother, Angulimala is going to be in big trouble for many, 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 many lifetimes. And it's said that he intuited that there was something about Angulimala, his deep hunger for the way, which led him to buy into this deception. I don't think it could be a student, have a student like Angulimala is the only one who could become this way. The other students would be like, yeah, maybe not. Maybe they'd try cutting off a couple fingers, but probably they'd be like, yeah. But Angulimala does it full force, right? Does it full force. And so the Buddha decides to intercede. And it's a short interaction, but he finds Angulimala, and Angulimala sees him, is setting upon him to kill him, and the Buddha just turns and he starts walking. And it's this beautiful description in the sutra that the Buddha just walked at a steady, even pace. But that actually he wasn't walking. This was a manifestation of his spiritual power. It just looked like he was walking. And Angulimala tries to catch him. And he's running as fast as he can, but he can't get close to him. And he's only a couple steps behind him. And the faster he runs, the Buddha doesn't change speed at all. He's just going this very consistent pace, at least in the mind of Angulimala. But Angulimala can't get to him. And finally, completely worn out, he falls to his knees, and Angulimala says, "Stop! Stop!" And the Buddha stops, turns around, and he says, "Angulimala, I have already stopped. Now you must stop." And it's said that that's the point in which Angulimala realized that the deception of what he had been following. And he gave up his garland of fingers, he received the tonsure and became a renunciate, and was a very close student of the Buddha. Interestingly enough, he later became the kind of patron saint of childbirth, for helping women in childbirth. This story is a story about stopping. Angulimala needed to stop. He had been deceived, and he was continuing to deceive himself. Even though the origins of his inspiration to live in that way, we could say, were wholesome. His intentions were to wake up and to help all beings. But he had taken this side road, and the side road had devoured him in the deception, and his character and his being had totally changed. But the Buddha could see something different in him, and so that's why he could say, "Stop." This is so much like us. A kind of deceptions about what is good or what is wholesome that we find in some place, and we keep doing it. Now, sometimes we know it's not perfectly good. I imagine Angulimala probably also had some doubts about whether this was really the right path, as he was killing people, etc. This is a myth, by the way, probably. We don't really know. There are some scholars who thought that maybe it was a kind of critique against some tantric practices or something like that, but who knows? Anyway, we do so many things which are kind of in the direction of what it is that we are inspired to, or that we know to be real or true or important. But oftentimes we don't stop. The kind of push forward, the kind of reckless way that we try to accomplish something. And so if we hear this story and then think about what is it to practice ethics animated by wisdom, animated by these 5 flavors of illuminated seeing that I've been talking about, that's what I'd like to start exploring next week a little bit. What are the things which, and I'm gonna focus first on the prohibition type ethics, and the reason I'm doing that is because Americans don't like them. Sorry, guys. We just don't. We're like, well, couldn't we talk about the positive side of the precepts? It's like, yep, we can talk about those after we talk about the prohibitions. Because everyone wants to skip over the not misusing sexuality for what is a co-creative, joyous sexual life, right? Super into that, but oftentimes it's a dodge from the other one, which is like, what should you not do, right? So that's why I like to start there. It's also what's recorded. There's almost no recording of a positive side of those injunctions up until the modern period, which is great. I think those are important, but not as important as the prohibitions. So I'll focus on that a little bit. So this week, I'm just inviting people to think about, what is it when you're seeing things? How do those ways of seeing things change the way you think about stopping, about the way you just stepping back from something and allowing a centeredness, a groundedness to appear in the abstaining from something. That side of ethics. And I'm sure there'll be plenty to talk about that next week. But we have a little time for questions today. Anyone has any?
I've missed a couple of talks, but I've also listened to them. And I'm thinking of your 5 flavors. One way I'm looking at it is it seems like it's kind of, that is the path. You know, we start out with like, oh, it's impermanent. I mean, my kids throw that at me all the time. You know, it's something very simple. They go, oh, Mom, it's impermanent. You know, that sort of thing.
I wonder where they learned that.
Yeah, I know. But you know, on the other hand, it's like I can see myself kind of bouncing among the 5 of them at various times. You know, when it's something like a broken glass, it's like, oh well. You know, when it's something like, you know, I don't know, difficulty in relationships, that's a whole different level of dealing with. I don't know if you just want to say a little bit more about that.
One thing I find really helpful in this kind of formation, it's true with the paramitas themselves, but in these 5 facets of emptiness. There's more facets, by the way, but those are just the 5 that we're working with. One way that I like to think about it is it's good to go through them like, you know, starts here and it leads to this and it leads to this and it leads to this and it leads to this. That's one way. But after you're going through that a few times, then also think about it like a 5-pointed star, maybe with a pentagram around it, which will be very, so everyone is connected to every other one. If you really look into any of them, you find the others. And that way is also important. So both of those, kind of like a progressive, if you can appreciate, oh, this is ungraspable. So my trying to grasp it doesn't work. Whether it's ungraspable in time or ungraspable just in as it is, that kind of loosening the grip on it is a just very fundamental practice, comes right at the beginning. And then through that, you start to see how everything's involved in it. And then you start to see, oh, my position is not just as an observer. Because up until that point, you can stay in the just kind of observing. Oh, it's all wonderful. It's all interconnected out there. And then you're interconnected to it. And once you're interconnected to it, it's like, uh-oh. Now might be, right? And then you don't have any place to stand. But that's the place when it's fully embraced where things start to appear just as they are. You're no longer pushing on them. Because when you don't really see through your own interdependence, then everything's relational in a kind of push-pull way. Even things that are really wonderful, they're wonderful. Take the photograph, store it, keep it, it's great, you know, but then it's back to step 1 again, which is, oh, I forgot it, it broke, it wasn't what I thought it was, whatever. And so things just being exactly what they are then becomes possible. And that's where now there's a different way of being in relation, where we're not bound in that way. So going through like that and then starting to see, okay, I'm in all these places all at once. And which one is sort of appearing most right now? Great, go with that one.
I think about generosity a lot, maybe more than the others, and I'm wondering if this is another reason, if it's the first. It feels like without generosity, we're not here. That I mean, the world is generous, and we're growing food, and it makes it possible for us to live. And I mean, it just feels like it's all generosity, everything.
Hallelujah. You know, we can cue into that on like growing food, for example, and then that sustains us. That's a really good place to pay attention. And it's why food and ethics around food are so central within Buddhist teaching. And then if we look past the food, we'll start seeing like everything. If we just talk about the material world, we'll just leave it there because that's relatively consensus among people. The material world is all. It's phenomena after phenomena, or we could say thing after thing. Not begrudging anything at all. To be part of my experience means the complete generosity of that cushion. It's begrudging nothing. It's totally willing to appear in this limited form that I can meet. And its total offering to me is what my realizing can orient my life, reorient my life. if I see the cushion in that way, then there's a very different world than this cushions we need to get where they're supposed to go, and this one's worn out, and da 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 da. Actually, our best chance of taking care of the cushion is to realize its generosity, and then it becomes natural to care for it. That's the direction that we're trying to go. And if that starts it, then all these other things on the path, particularly notice meditations all the way to 5. And 6, which is wisdom, isn't really a thing at all. So you don't get to practice it. You're going to practice it through meditation. But meditation's after all these other things, if you go in order. But in the West, we tend to start with meditation. And we say, that other stuff is cultural baggage and blah, 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 blah. No. That other stuff is teaching us to respect the life of the cushion. Know that the cushion is seeing me while I'm seeing the cushion. Yeah. So just riffing off what you said. Thank you.
I've been, in my world of having family, running business, I really find myself a lot of times begrudging the way my time is commodified, and really, whether it's like having to give a price to my time for a client, or in a similar vein, time with my kids. And so I struggle with how to not to appreciate that is just the flavor of my life right now, and find freedom despite it, or within it somehow, that carries the flavor of emptiness, as you're talking about, and ultimately with that idea of how do I liberate from the small-mindedness that is kind of demanded of me, and running in those small economic wheels.
Yeah. So there's a bit of a, let me say this. To be a monk is the easiest, by far, because you just say, okay, not doing that, and generosity is just the basis. Right? To be kind of semi-monk like me is the next easiest, because you get to kind of say, we're going to have an institution that's not operated on that, and then that will be my sustenance. By semi-monk I mean like not a renunciate. But the principle is the same. So when we're endeavoring to realize the Buddha way with all beings, to liberate ourselves and all beings, when we're orienting in that path, that has to have traction. It has to have specificity. As an idea, it's great, but it's sort of like, who cares? Right? So in the grounding of it, in the actual practical application of it, there are tons of details. There are tons of things that have to be done. And that's the same whether you're a monk or not. But how is the motivation then translated into how I'm holding the work? That's, I think, where the real practice is. And so you've dedicated yourself to a vocation for a reason, not only because you're inclined towards it and you're a gearhead. That's what my architect father fondly called engineers, which you were originally, right?
Yeah.
And then the architect. So you've got a head for that. That's interesting to you. You're good at it. You know how to make things happen. You've built this whole skill set, and you're dedicated to how can housing, we need housing. People need housing. Just like to do all this other liberating work. This is a fundamental need. So orienting in that, how do you move? That becomes the question. It's so easy to get trapped in that little wheel that you're in, whatever it is. I'm building this client, I'm trying to get the bids come in on time, or whatever it is. But once you lock in that reality rather than the larger reality of your vow, then you're going to suffer, right? And that's going to happen, right? But that's why the vow becomes so important. Now, if I was going to say, what does it mean to stay more directly connected to the vow? There's a kind of surprising avenue for that, and it's imagination. So when you're doing that kind of work and you feel it getting narrower, notice how your image of what's happening, your imagination of what's possible, or even your imagination about what is actually going on, it's just getting narrower and narrower and narrower and narrower. And money is one of the strongest pulls on imagination, to just like reduce to something and cut the imagination off. So a kind of practical thing I would say is when you feel that tightening happen, get a little, I was gonna say Disney, but I prefer Miyazaki Hao, get a little like out of your head. Like read some fairy tales, read some sutras. Like see that in the Lotus Sutra when it talks about the jewels on all the trees, it's not talking about someplace else. It's talking about right here. And so what is a price even in that realm? That's the place where a vow can really take on a life that then creates the world that it sees, as opposed to just being in this reduction to something we've decided already is the way it is. But we're always in that kind of place. So I don't know. Is there any kind of like imaginative things that turn your crank? I mean, for a period, I was always trying to get you to do more art.
Yeah. I mean, designing my own house that I'll probably never build, but like
sweet.
I don't have to build anybody.
Yeah, you just build it in your house over and over and over again. Yeah. Which is probably gives food to all the houses you actually do build. Yeah. So those are the kind of places where keeping connected to our own enthusiasm is also our own inspiration, is also our own vision. It's like, what's the world that I want to see? And actually the world that I can see. Then that allows me to work with the material of my life in a way that's a context that's much bigger than, I've just let it collapse into the material of my life. That's the mistake we're making over and over again. I heard yesterday it was just a little bit, you ever get in the car and you turn the radio on? I do that. I like to listen to the radio. I like to listen to not talk shows like Rush Limbaugh talk shows, but like about things. They have it on 12:80 a.m. What's that one? From down south? Yeah, that kind of thing. And I got in just in time to hear, when you get married, actually scores on happiness go up for the first 2 years. Then they plane out, and so does your attraction to your mate, and so does your like all these things. And I was listening to this, and I was like, I believe that is true if you do not unleash the power of your imagination. When you fall in love, your imagination is completely full of the beauty of this person and the world and all that could be. And then somehow we let the imagination get in a tug of war with the reality, right? And then we tug between these two things. And then the reality starts to win. But there's another path, which is to say, nope, I'm not shutting the imagination down, which is not to say, when you wish upon a star. No, it's actually to say, my job is to pull this so-called reality into the world of imagination and to let the imagination be a participant in how the things unfold. So anyway, just a little suggestion for people who are in parents and in marriages and romantic relationships and that kind of thing. Don't give up on that. Passion has got to be there. Imagination has to be there, or else that's, in 10 years later you're like, I don't know, I'm sleeping next to this person. Okay, I'll stop preaching about that. I need to stop here, but I want to read something very quickly to you by a very imaginative person, Eshin, who is, many of you know, he practiced here for a number of years. He's a jazz musician and amazing trumpet player. And he went to Japan, it must have been 8 years or so ago. And he really wanted to live in Japan. He did. And he married a Japanese woman a number of years ago. And he was ordained maybe 3 years ago, maybe 2 years ago, in the Soto school. He has a teacher in Japan, and he was doing some monastic training at Toshoji, where Genjo did some training. They saw each other there last year. And then I saw him in January when I went to Toshoji for official visit kind of stuff. And I saw him there and was able to talk with him for a little while. It was really nice. For those of you who know Heshin, he hasn't changed at all, in a good way, we just had very lively discussion, and he said, I'm going to go to Eiheiji. Now, one thing to know about Eshin is he has lots of tattoos, like full sleeve. It's like one full sleeve of Shinran Shonin, who's the founder of the Shin school of Buddhism in Japan. Anyway, and I was like, they're not going to let you in. And he said, well, because they had a rule against tattoos. And he said, well, this is the deal. I've been the attendant to the head of training at Eiheiji when he comes to Toshoji, and I've been assigned to be his attendant over the past 6 months. So every time he comes, I'm serving him tea, and Eshin's quite good at kind of sucking up. And so he said, and so I told him I wanted to train at Eiheiji, and so he cleared it for me. So they're going to let me into Eiheiji, which is kind of his dream. So he was there, and then when I was at Eiheiji in April, again for kind of official visits for the bishop's office, they this funny scene. So I was walking down with this big group of people. We had a tour of people, and we were walking down the hallway in Eiheiji, very close to the main gate. And there's a garden there, and there's some training monks there weeding in the garden. And there's a window with like a grid of wood in it, and there's just 2 places where there's not a panel of glass. And as I'm walking by, I hear, Ejo! Ejo! Which is totally a training monk's not supposed to do. But there's his face in that little window with his hands like shot out from the window. And I grabbed his hands and I'm like, oh, Eshin, Eshin. And he said, call for me. Because if I went on a regular visit, if I was just going, because I'm a senior monk, I could go and then I could say, oh, one of my former students is here in training. Could we have tea together? And they would bring him and we would have tea together. But it wasn't that kind of situation. I couldn't do that. So I was like, no, I'm sorry. I couldn't. They kind of like let go of his hands. He's behind the glass and the bars. And he's sort of got this look in his eyes. Like he's just been there for a month or so. And training in Eiheiji as a novice is really hard. It's really hard training. So I could see the kind of like, this in his eyes. So anyway, and then we came back, and then last week this letter arrived. It's very short. He sent me a personal letter, and then he asked me to read this to the community, so I'll do that. He said, to my dearest Buddha Eye Temple, I trust you are all doing your best as the heat of Eugene summer sets in. Lots of zazen and contemplating the many ways the Sugata's wisdom appears over wonderful winter practice always makes summer wonderful for this mountain monk. I hope you all have some kind of good, contented feeling too. I hope you are all taking good care of one another too. As I write to you, I am working in the kitchen of Eiheiji. It is a particularly unforgiving place of practice. Hot, cold, grueling, 2 a.m. wake up, 10 p.m. sleeping, a hot bath on a good day. Cook, wash, clean, repeat. In the blinding busy fervor, a human mind deprived of time and frivolity becomes soft and ungrasping, unable, it seems, to hold on to thoughts for very long at all. But what has appeared to me on many occasions are the gentle, loving wisdom and other lessons I carry around from Buddha Eye. I pray that the fruits of the 3 treasures continue to enrich all who enter the gateless gate on Garfield Street. And furthermore, I pray you are all well when we meet again. May we, with all beings, deeply encounter Buddha's profound and mysterious teaching. So much gratitude. 9 prostrations. Eshi. And he's there a little bit longer, we can send him chocolate. Now I don't think it will get to him.